Hello and a very warm welcome to you all. I'm Vikas Nangia with another episode of CyberWatch. Ladies and gentlemen, as digital transformation has made the world more interconnected, cyber attacks have become some of the most common and dangerous types of threats. Today on the program with our special guest, we'll discuss on the topic securing critical infrastructure. My first guest on the program has flown in all the way from Southern California. She is Margareta Petrovic. Margareta is the Global Managing Partner for Risk and Cybersecurity at TCS. My second guest on the program is the industry veteran, founder and CEO of DigitalXForce and iTrustXForce, Lalit Ahluwalia. Lalit and Margareta, thank you so very much for joining us on CyberWatch.
Pleasure.
It is a pleasure to have both of you, and today we are talking on some critical topic, and we want to understand from you what is critical infrastructure. Keeping up with the chivalry, Lalit, I'll start with Margareta.
Please.
So let's think a little bit about what our everydays look like. We are enjoying power, we are enjoying oil, telecommunication networks, and we don't even think about them, how important they are until something goes wrong. Mm-hmm. So to make it a little bit simpler, everything that is allowing us to have this modern lifestyle and all the things that we are assuming as for granted is creating critical infrastructure around us.
So Lalit, as a cybersecurity expert, how do you view critical infrastructure?
So I think Margareta very well articulated. Things we really see are very important, and we do not understand the value until something bad happens.
Right.
Of course, one way that things bad can happen is through cyber attacks. But before we get there, as you said, I come from Texas, and folks who probably remember the winter freeze that happened just a couple of years back in Texas. And everything came to a standstill because the power grids could not support anything because of the winter freeze. The critical infrastructure fell through.
Right.
The day-to-day impact was there were no supply of electricity and then internet and everything, and life became in havoc. I remember it took me 4 months to even get a pool guy to come and fix my pool equipment.
Right.
That's how they were backlogged. Now, that was one of its own kind natural disaster event that brought a critical infrastructure, which is the power grid and stuff and electricity going out.
Right.
Imagine if I can manifest that event as many times as I want. Means I can create those events, and that is through cyber attack, and create a havoc as many times that happens. That's how we want to see the cyber in the context of critical infrastructure.
Make us understand, why do hackers really target critical infrastructure? I'll start with you, Margareta, first.
There are different motivations. Initially, most of the cybersecurity attacks in general started as adrenaline rush, as a thrill, to demonstrate that you can do it. So it wasn't uncommon to have a couple of teenagers that are just trying to do something that is forbidden and to feel good about their skills, how they're overcoming that adult world. That is long gone. In this time and age, there are many different reasons above and beyond adrenaline rush to go ahead and try to attack attractive target. It's much cheaper and easier and more sneaky to run political campaigns or different tensions across the globe based on a cyber. You don't need weapons, you don't need big armies, and you can create a lot of damage. So to answer your question, there are different reasons, from pure curiosity until state-funded attacks, nation-funded.
Interesting. Lalit?
Well, so in the physical world, why do people kidnap people?
For financial gains.
So think of kidnapping as another instance in the digital world. So Colonial Pipeline hack, which everybody, and we're going to talk more detail at some point.
Right.
I jam the pipelines and no oil can flow and only control. And in order for you to recover that, you pay me some money,
right?
Bitcoins and stuff. What is that? A financial motivation. If I'm going to pay $5 million for that job, I better be good at that job, right? That's one kind of motivation.
Right.
Then comes political reasons. The nations who do not like each other and they want to cripple each other out. When this Russia-Ukraine crisis happened, what was the first thing at the forefront? The cyber warfare.
Right.
When U.S. invaded Iran, what was the first implication? Cyber warfare. What do you think they're going to go after first? They're going to go after your critical infrastructure, whether it's the transportation systems, whether it's power grid, nuclear plant, creating havoc, right?
Right.
So the motivations are multifold, and there are instances where I want to make a point to the society. I'm just grumpled and I did not, see a meeting, and I want to make my point forward, and I'm motivated with that.
Right.
There are ample reasons right now because where I can really hijack the critical infrastructure. The impact though is monumental now because of how we are reliant on the critical infrastructure to live our day-to-day lives.
You both have given a good overview of what critical infrastructure is. We're going to take a quick short break over here. On the other side of the break, we want to break this down to day-to-day risks at critical infrastructure. What the consumers should be aware, what folks at the public and the private sector should be careful about. We'll take a quick short break over here. On the other side of the break, we'll resume our conversation with Margareta and Lalit. Viewers, stay tuned. We'll be right back with CyberWatch. In this segment, I want to break this down to day-to-day risks when we talk about critical infrastructure. Margareta, would you give us some insight?
So, of course, day-to-day risks are not only related to cybersecurity. Risk can happen because of the negligence. We can have an example for what happened with Flint, Michigan, where there was no cybersecurity attack, but there were implications with the water pollution by lead that actually create a lot of risk and health risks and problems for the local people.
Right.
It took years to recover from that incident.
Right.
So bottom line is that the problem is not only within cybersecurity risks. There are risks that can happen because of the lightning stroke.
Right.
1977 blackout in New York City was not caused by anything other than natural disasters.
Correct.
There are quite a few examples of similar nature, but we all have to be watching around us what is going on. We have to observe that if some unusual circumstances are happening, you should not think it's somebody else's problem.
Right.
It's all of our problem. We have to take accountability and responsibility to add on to all the monitoring that we already have and support our critical infrastructure. To name another example, in 2014, when there was a big blackout in the northeast of US,
right.
What actually happened is we had 2 trees that created a physical damage,
right.
And we had one monitoring system that was not updated, therefore it couldn't do its job. If there was a human element that could notice what happened,
right.
And stop the issue, maybe we would not experience that big of a blackout.
Right, interesting. Lalit, what are your thoughts?
So let me take it back to the old kingdom days for a second. Okay, the critical infrastructure, how is that correlated to how people for centuries have dealt with this? So when a kingdom will get attacked, they get surrounded by the forces from the other, right? You could be behind the big walls that cannot be breached. But what are they trying to prevent now? Cut the water supplies. Cut like any food supplies that are going into this one so that they have to open the doors. Otherwise, how long can they survive?
Right.
What is that? Those pipelines, like, that taking water or the food supply, that's critical infrastructure. So in the physical ecosystem, the risk was what? As long as you cut, like you are the breacher, like, I can now win this war.
Right.
Or the people will suffer. Now equate in the new digital era now. In New Jersey, New York, Colonial Pipeline. What happened when there was no fuel supply? People were like demand and supply. Like, first of all, the gas prices will be going up.
Correct.
You're paying financial consequences,
Correct.
right? Even though it's not
a supply chain issue.
Supply chain issue. On top of that, I might be actually not go to work and suffer from that consequences too.
Right.
Because there's no gas. Like, why going to be driving?
Right.
Now, some of these things are really coming because overall infrastructure is getting hacked, but it's also impacting me as an individual. Not to say they could be life-threatening. Like, what if the healthcare, hospital systems get cut out? Or the transportation systems really within a click of a button, and havoc. There's a life and death consequences there too.
Correct.
So that risk is really becoming more real now. Where it's going to become more and more prominent is because digitally connected, I don't have to go and rob a bank physically anymore. I can digitally rob a bank.
Right.
Now I can hack into critical infrastructure digitally rather than manually going and stopping all the water supplies. That's where the equation comes down to.
Right. So clearly there is a involvement of government sector, private sector, and the public. There's at all three facets, all the three need to be in sync, and there has to be a good camaraderie. The consumers should hold some responsibility. There has to be some accountability at the consumers' end. But more importantly, it starts with the government and the private sector. So let's first start with the government and the private sector, and then from private to consumer, and all three of them. Yeah. What would you say, Margareta?
So I would say that government has clear responsibility in setting the right standards and laws.
It starts from them.
Yes, but it's not enough. Because there has to be a good adoption, and law is not going to tell you by itself how you translate the requirements into practical activities. That is where, again, because of the lack of funding in the public sector and different kind of exposure when it comes to cybersecurity, we get more value coming from private sector. Private sector is more fast-paced, it has more investments, it's more creative, has fewer filters and layers of approval before they can deploy some high-end technologies, some high-end ideas, and try and error. Therefore, if we can get the best of both, governments that have a way to mandate or enforce or get bigger visibility into what are the requirements we have to satisfy, and then private sector that can bring value from field-tested experience and more high-end technologies, we would get the best of the both worlds. Now, in addition, you did mention citizens. We as citizens, we have role in our own lives and responsibilities to our own obligations, families, finances, education, surrounding, you name it, is there. But in addition, every single individual is part of some organization, some community. So if we are doing all the best practices in terms of basic cyber hygiene in our personal lives, that can also save and serve our citizen lives and our professional lives. I'll illustrate this again with an example. One of the security 101 hygiene elements for every single person is do not reuse your password over and over again everywhere. If you're thinking about the colonial pipeline that Lalit just mentioned, it seems that the root cause of the core issue was not technology. The problem was that one of the employees used the same password for some other account as well as for secure software that is allowing secure connection.
Lalit, also make us understand to trace, just as the way Margareta mentioned about, somebody used the password which was used at some other place as well. I'm sure tracing what the root cause was for the critical infrastructure to fail actually, how do you guys do that as cybersecurity experts?
Well,
tracing must be a big challenge as well.
Well, we call the term called forensics, to be honest, like what the term is called. It's not tracking or tracing, but the instance where I want to bring it back is the commonly used passwords. One can compromise, I can try to apply somewhere else. And on top of that, you don't have any two-factor, things, then God bless you. On top of that, when password is password, I don't even do a brute force attack. That's the first or the second attempt, you're done.
And this kind of attack is, you guys refer it as what, ransomware attack?
the overall attack is called ransom. When the purpose is ransom, right, to really get the ransom.
Right.
But attack itself is not called ransomware. It's called brute force attack when I'm trying to click the passwords, or from the dark web I'm using and injecting that. So there are different ways to attack, but what the overall threat is ransomware threat.
Okay.
That's what really it comes down to.
Okay.
But your tracing or the forensic part, which I really want to address, these are the common techniques, what I call it, with the bad actors use to really pull the different kind of attacks patterns, right? Again, go back to the same thing. I'm trying to attack. How can I penetrate into this particular kingdom, which is behind the vault? I'm trying to figure where the gates are, or where the point of entries are, where the maybe underground channels are, right? The bad actors are looking for all the same methods.
Sure.
In the digital ecosystem, what my back channels are. Forget about passwords. What if your software already has a hard-coded account that even software vendor doesn't know now anymore? And I got it because I've already tested the software. Oh, I know there's this account which nobody knows, and there's a vulnerability, which is called zero-day vulnerability.
Right.
And can access that, which you don't even know. You're not even monitoring that gate.
Right.
And it's a free traffic coming in.
Yeah.
So those are some of the methods, right, which we're doing. But I do want to talk about the role, because I want to simplify this, right? Critical infrastructure. There's someone owns critical infrastructure. There's somebody manages and operates.
Right.
And there's somebody who consumes.
Correct.
So government.
And that's where the three sectors come in.
Exactly, right? Now, government or private can own. Some sectors are owned by government, some are owned by private, some are both, semi, right? Kuzai. Some are managed and operated by government directly, some are managed by private, some are managed by in collaboration. Consumer. At the end of the day, consumer is who? We all are the consumers.
Right.
That's where the partnership really comes in. If that usage end-to-end life cycle manual require all three parties, the responsibilities also lie between all of them.
Right.
And hence why they all have to talk to each other and participate with each other to make sure you're not falling prey anywhere.
Now we'll talk more about that, but first let's take a quick short break over here. When we return back, viewers, first we'll take a quick look at the CyberWatch news flash, and then we'll resume back to our conversation. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back. You're watching CyberWatch, ladies and gentlemen, with our special guests today on the program, Margareta Petrovic and Lalit Ahluwalia. Today on the program, we are talking about securing critical infrastructure. We'll resume back with our conversation, but first, let's take a quick look at the CyberWatch news flash.
U.S. Department of Justice sues Apple over messaging monopoly, alleging security compromises. In a landmark antitrust lawsuit, the U.S. Department of Justice, DOJ, joined by 16 state and district attorneys general, has accused Apple of illegally maintaining a monopoly over smartphones, undermining the security and privacy of users when messaging non-iPhone users.
Lalit, resuming back on our conversation, the topic that we were discussing prior to the break, what should be the role of citizens over here?
I think because let's first segregate, it's not the government, not with the citizens or private. Different countries have different models.
Right.
Just go up north in Canada, not too far. Healthcare systems is all public.
Correct.
Not as much private.
Right. And that's in a lot of European countries as well.
Lots in European countries too. So it's critical infrastructure, they run.
Sure.
And that's where the government works hand in hand with the citizens or the consumer directly.
Right.
There are other countries which are more capitalist or privatization, and our US, we operate in the same model. Either way, I think both the models still have significant lapses. Not even at the citizen and the consumer level, even the public-private partnerships, which is between the government and private, there's so much of a push happening, but still it's not at the levels that you will think, that the integration is already there.
Right.
And I'll let Margareta comment more on that critical infrastructure and why that partnership is even more important, especially in wake of the nation-state hacktism and other things. Who's falling victim of all that?
Right, right. Margareta, would you like to build up on what Lalit said? And in addition to this, when we talk about critical infrastructure, which is the most vulnerable area?
Oof, that's a difficult question. Because vulnerabilities depend on your circumstances. And cutting off water supply and food supply in that sequencing would be, in my opinion, the worst, because you can't survive without those. It may sound unbelievable. We can survive without power. We can survive without gas. Trust me, I've been through sanctions for a very long time, and it may sound unbelievable, but it's possible. Right. So water and food. Water and food.
Lalit, what would you say?
I feel data is the new oil machinery, and you take a phone device away from anyone, they want to rather prefer die of hunger than of out of phone. That's the reality, all right? And live a day without internet, it seems like you go into the Stone Age days.
Right.
So I think everyone is very hard to rationalize. Obviously, there are certain things which I call life-threatening. I always put healthcare in that segment. Because even food and stuff you can still survive with some ration and stuff, but what the healthcare systems are out, I'm sorry, there are people dying.
Once you folks have diagnosed and the forensic process is going on, something that takes time to set up, to resume back, and it has to be done under a certain amount of time. How pressurizing is that, Margareta?
Very pressurizing. In ideal circumstances, there should be backup recovery plans when the most common or the most expected issues are pre-identified, and there is some sequencing of events that was rehearsed with different team members, different organizations, different roles to come up with a plan. How would you recover in a real-world scenario? So ideally, not so good situation would not see us unprepared, but in reality, that is not the case. So in many of the instances, backup recovery plans, procedures are not there, or maybe just scenarios were not covered to any of the extent, or roles of people in the organization changed and plans were stale. So it can happen that unforeseen circumstances find us very much off guard.
Yeah. So let's do an experiment. Everybody take your phone out and drop in the water. Now go back and see what the consequences of that if we haven't backed up your contact list.
Right.
Or critical messages.
Right.
For that matter, let's say your laptop is stolen. What are you going to do without that now? These are just some of those mini experiments, but equate into critical infrastructure now. That supply is lost. What Margareta was talking about earlier, the backup and the restore, is very important.
Right.
When you fall victim, you need to be able to restore back everything. Now, there's certain kind of attacks, you don't know when you even get your data back altogether for processing. Or, for that matter, the services will be restored to the same levels. You pretty much put in the back foot. That's really one of the big critical component of this, is taking regular backups and restore, like financial services, right?
Correct.
They do not have a tolerance for even a microsecond of data loss.
Sure.
And that's the reason why they have to heavily invest into all these backups and everything, and there's no one more secure in that fashion for backups and security than the financial, because the consequences are such.
Yeah.
The other infrastructure component is not so much over there.
Yeah. My curiosity to understand critical infrastructure more is sort of increasing, and I'm sure at the viewers' end also they want to understand. We would like to continue this topic in our next episode as well with both of you, and would like to break this down that when you work with your clients at your level, from company to company, at an individual level, what are some of the challenges that you all face, and what is it that you would like to explain it to the viewers that they should be prepared for when it comes to critical infrastructure, and not just transportation, when we talk about energy, water, hospitals, healthcare, so much more. So I guess we'll continue with this in our next episode as well. Viewers, it's time for us to wrap our tonight's episode of CyberWatch. If you want to write us, send in your questions to cyberwatch@tvasiausa.com. CyberWatch is powered by DigitalXForce and iTrustXForce. If you want to reach out to Lalit, what's the best way out?
Through our websites, DigitalXForce.com or iTrustXForce.com, or our social media pages, whether it's LinkedIn or the Twitter, now X, as XForce. Again, our motto, let's fight the dark side together.
Lalit and Margareta, thank you so much for joining us for this episode, and we'll resume back with the conversation in our next episode as well. Viewers, until next time, this is Vikas Nangia signing off. Thank you for watching.